Hello and welcome to episode 168 of the Clean Energy Show. Coming to you from the hellish purgatory of an airport hotel. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham.
This one isn't hard. You don't need a sophisticated model. You take unusual heat, unusual drought, you put them together, and you get more expansive wildfires, hotter burning, faster spreading, more dangerous, more damaging wildfires. And we've seen that around the world.
16 young people ranging in age from 5 to 22 are suing the state. They're saying the state government is failing to protect them from climate change.
And the best news ever was when Ford decided that they were going to go and take the Tesla approach. And the second best news ever was when GM followed the lead of Ford. I'm telling you right now, the world is a new place. This is going to be huge for electrification.
This week on the podcast, teenagers in Montana are suing their state government for wrecking the planet that they would like to live on. Kevin Costner has yet to respond.
Electric truck maker Rivian has acquired EV road trip software company A Better Route Planner. First order of business will be to plan our route to profitability for Rivian.
Boeing predicts airlines around the world will add over 42,000 jets over the next 2 decades, in spite of climate change concerns. The good news is only 2% of those jets are expected to ruin Brian's vacations.
A Norwegian cruise line company is working on an electric cruise ship that will carry 500 passengers. Can an electric reboot of the Love Boat be far behind?
And also this week's show, a John Deere electric riding mower listener experience. The decline of solar prices isn't going to stop anytime soon, and I got a new hat. All that and more on this edition of the Clean Energy Show. You sound different this week, Brian. What's wrong? What's going on?
Well, two things. The main thing is I'm stuck in an airport hotel, but also I have a bit of a cold. I did pick up a cold about 10 days into my vacation. So yeah, I might sound a little funny. Hopefully it's not too echoey here in the hotel room, but we got bumped again by Air Canada. We came home from London to Toronto on Sunday. That's 2 days ago now. And we were all set to get on our flight from Toronto to Regina back home. And they had just literally scanned our boarding passes at the gate to get on the plane. And a flight attendant came out of the airplane and said, "Oh, we're canceling." One of the pilots says the plane is unbalanced.
Yeah, I told my partner that, and she said, "Is that a mental health condition?" Like, what are they talking
Yes,
about?
I mean, yes, it is. But I think it has something to do with the fuel.
I don't think it does, Brian. I don't think it does, because they could fix that.
Oh, okay.
As an aviation expert, I can tell you they can fix that. You know how they fix that? They put more fuel in the other damn wing.
Yeah, but maybe that would take too long or something.
They can also transfer it, and maybe that would take too long. However, when I looked up balanced flights canceled due to balance, they say that's because too many people are sitting on one side. So what they have to do is go through and assign different seating. See, I would take that personally, being a large, heavy man myself.
Well, it was a full flight. I mean, all the seats were filled.
Okay. Then I can't help you. I think it's bogus. I think it's an excuse. I think unbalanced means the pilot was drunk.
When we got our cancellation notice from Air Canada, it said due to problems at the airport destination, like limitations of the airport that we were going to. So that seems bogus as well. So I'm not really sure. But anyway, we checked into a hotel room at the airport. So 2 extra nights added on to our trip. We're still not home yet. We're rescheduled for 6 p.m. tonight, which is the same flight, just 2 days later. And, hopefully we get on. Hopefully it takes off. But I'm worried if that one's canceled, it's like it's an evening flight. It would have been so much better if there was a morning flight, but I don't think they do morning flights to Regina. So, hopefully this one's not canceled, and hopefully we're home tonight.
Let me ask you this. Are you going to fly again anytime soon? Because you've been screwed royally. And I'm not just saying that because you went to London. I'm saying royally the last 2 times you've flown in the last few months.
Yeah, we lost a full day on the way to London, and now they've added 2 days at the airport in Toronto at the end of the trip. The last time it happened, it was at Christmas. That was WestJet. This is Air Canada. WestJet, to their credit, that was a blizzard. Like, there was a reason for the cancellation. But we were stuck, same problem, stuck at the airport for a couple of days. This is a complete self-own by Air Canada. This is entirely their fault. It used to be a half-decent airline, but now I'm not so sure. And we're trying to keep thinking of ways to beat the system and make this work. And here's the latest I've come up with is just book 2 versions of every flight with 2 different airlines. So you have a backup plan. So if you're at the airport at 6 p.m., your flight is canceled, you're like, oh, great. I'll just go over to my WestJet flight that leaves in 2 hours. You just got to make sure it's the kind of flight that you can either get a refund on and when you cancel it, or you get like a credit with WestJet. So, maybe I could just have a couple of $1,000s of credits in the bank at WestJet and just always have 2 different flights booked.
Wow.
Which is insane, but
that is insane. That's bloody insane. So that's your level of faith. Brian, before you continue, I just want to point out that I have a Clean Energy Show hat on if you're watching on the YouTube. I got my hat in the mail. However, a couple days ago was Father's Day, and I'm going to switch hats now. Live on the show, taking one hat off and putting another one on.
Ceremonial switching of the hats.
A Toronto Blue Jays hat, not in honor of you being stuck in Toronto, but my son gave me the hat and he said, Dad, wear it on the podcast. You'll look like more of a regular guy instead of an elitist.
Well, we'll see.
So, and also my sympathies to the Toronto Blue Jays, who are having their worst slump in history. By the way, when I got the hat, I put it on, watched a game on Father's Day. They went up 6-0. I got tired, took a nap, took the hat off. They ended up losing 11-7. So it's a good luck hat, and if you want to bet on a team, I'll put it on for you or off, however you wish, as long as I get a cut.
Yeah.
So, how was your UK trip? What happened over there?
Here's the rest of the updates. Just a couple general observations. First of all, and I notice this every time I'm in Europe, but they're just always more energy conscious here. They're always more conscious of saving energy in Europe. Like in the hotels, in the hallways, there's motion sensor lights. So if nobody's walking in the hallway, the lights dim. Somebody comes into the hallway, they brighten up. I don't think I've ever seen that at a North American hotel. All the toilets are dual flush. Everyone we've seen, that's not so common in North America.
I wonder if they're just worried about clogging the toilets and the labor that would involve. But I mean, it's a lot of water involved.
Yeah, and of course in Canada, we have like the most fresh water available of any country in the world, I think. So we're not generally concerned about conserving water here.
No.
But anyway, so then the other thing is the cars, of course. Small hatchbacks with a manual transmission is still the default over here. I haven't been over here in a long time. Taxis will be a small hatchback with a manual transmission, and that's always a bit of a surprise to somebody from North America. We did take a couple of EVs because we took a few Ubers while we were here, Ubers and taxis. And one of the Ubers was a Nissan Leaf in London, and another one was an electric Kia Niro, so that was fun to see.
Really? A Leaf? Must have been a new Leaf, right?
It was one of the newer Leafs, and it was great, but that was nice to see. And then the other taxis we took tended to be small hatchbacks, and none of them had air conditioning, or none of them had the air conditioning turned on. I think, again, they're just energy conscious about it. Like it's been quite hot here, 28 Celsius.
Wow.
So,
that's air conditioning weather, man.
Yeah. So instead they drive around with the windows open, like it's the Stone Age.
Wow. That's very un-North American.
Yeah. And you would think that, okay, well, it's 28 and sunny in London. This is the time to turn on the air conditioning.
Sure. That's why it's there.
But still they don't really do that. So walking down the street one day in London, I saw one of those lamppost car chargers. So this is a level 2 charging port in a lamppost, which is something we probably talked about on the show.
So it's a plug, right? It doesn't have a cord because the cord could be vandalized. You bring your own cord to the situation?
Yeah, you bring your own cord. It's, you have to stick both ends of the cord, like one end of the post, one end into your car. But it was cool to see one of those. And, a place like London, they're always jammed for space, and there's never enough parking spots for anybody. So to provide charging on the street for people with those lampposts makes a lot of sense. I was raving about the train service the last time when we spoke from Wales. We'd taken the train from London up to Wales, and it was excellent. Everything was great. And then we were in Wales for about a week, and we were chatting to people. We were told them, "Oh yeah, we're taking the train. We took the train up here." People were sort of surprised we didn't drive. And, 2 or 3 people said, "Oh, they do cancel the train sometimes." And we were like, "Oh, really? Okay, well, whatever. I don't know. Train service seemed great." But then sure enough, when we tried to get back to London, they canceled our train.
Why?
They never said. And we stayed an extra day in Wales because we were going to go back on Sunday, but we realized if we left on Sunday, it wasn't a direct route with the train. Like we'd have to change trains once or twice to get to London. So we thought, well, we'll stay an extra day, book it for Monday. Then it's just one train, 3 hours to London. We don't have to switch. I mean, how about all our big, heavy luggage with us as well? That's a pain when you're on the train and you got to switch trains. But, then train was canceled. And so we had to switch. We had to take 3 different trains to get back to London.
And that was hard.
Lugging all of our suitcases, and took 2 or 3 hours longer than it was supposed to. So the train did let us down, and we spoke to people about it, and they said for that particular route, like there's different routes within the country, within the continent, within the UK, and different private companies bid to get different routes. So until recently, these trains to Wales were run by Virgin. And everyone said, "Oh yeah, the Virgin service was way better." That there's a company called Avanti is who we were on, and since it switched to Avanti, the service has been a lot worse. And yeah, they just canceled trains. But there is so many trains frequently, you can still get to where you're going. It's just you got to get off here and get on a different train, etc.
How long would it have taken you to drive then if you rented a car?
Yeah, I think about the same, like 3 hours, 3 or 4 hours. And knowing what I know now and having to lug all of our suitcases on and off the train, I maybe would have rented a car.
Have you ever driven in the UK on the wrong side of the road?
No, and I don't really want to, which is why we didn't do that. I don't want to drive on the wrong side of the road and a lot of crazy narrow streets and everything. But given how much, how many trains we had to take and how many taxis we had to take, if I was doing it again, I might end up renting a car.
I see. Well, that's cool that you saw that lamppost charger. Those are not here in North America yet, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a few test neighborhoods in New York or somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there'll be a street light post that already has electricity in it. And then you just sort of add in a charge port on the street so you can charge on the street if you lived in an apartment and you were parking on the street, or a condo or multi-unit housing, things like that. So
yeah, which of course is an important thing in London because a lot of people don't have their own driveways. It's a densely populated city with lots of people in apartments, so it's important to think about that. I want to talk about riding the tube, riding the underground in London a bit more. Got to learn that a bit better, and it worked really well. One of the nice things about it is you can get on and off with Apple Pay. So we weren't sure how to do it because they also have these things called Oyster cards where you can load up on a fare on your Oyster card and you tap in and out. But somebody who worked on the tube said, no, just use Apple Pay, which I have on my watch. So any payment card you have on your Apple Pay, you just tap when you get on and then you tap when you get off. And it knows, okay, you've gone this distance. It knows exactly what to charge you. So that was amazing. It was incredibly convenient. And apparently they're going to start doing this in Toronto. That was not part of the system when they revamped it recently in Toronto, but they're finally starting to add that. I'm going to need to drink some water as we go along. My throat's a bit dry.
Well, in Toronto, for what? For the GO train, for commuters, or for the subway?
For the subway, for the TTC. Like right now, to ride the TTC in Toronto, you need to get one of those cards and load it up with cash or pay with tickets or something. They should have made it Apple Pay from the beginning, or whatever the Android equivalent is as well.
How was the weather?
And the weather was insane. It was like it rained once the entire time we were over there, overnight, once in Wales, and not that much. It was like 25, 28 and sunny the entire time, which is not normal for England or Wales. So it's, uncommonly dry. It's probably not good, but it was great for us as vacationers.
later in the show, I think we'll touch on the fact that there is a oceanic heat wave affecting the UK right now, which is unusual. And unusual is bad. Bad.
Yeah, and but the tube was great. Like, they have such an extensive network of trains. It's amazing. The Elizabeth line is the best one. That's the one that goes from Heathrow, and it's the brand new line that's east-west. And those trains are large and new and amazing. Some of the other trains, they're smaller, they're more cramped. They still go quite quickly. I was impressed with how quickly they go, but they don't have air conditioning. They're smaller. They tend to be cramped and crowded. So, there's a downside to it. But, the new Elizabeth line is amazing. We took that again back to the airport. Want to shout out a camera store in London called Grays of Westminster. That was fun to go to. It's a camera store that only sells Nikon camera gear, and I'm a big Nikon fan. And I'm shooting this on a Nikon camera. And it's a super cool store in London. It was nice to visit that. And the last thing, we went to see Tenacious D at the O2 Arena, the big venue in London in the
20,000 people it holds.
20,000 people. Tenacious D, and this is Jack Black's rock band. I know them mostly from the movie they made many years ago, Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny, a ridiculous, dumb comedy that I find quite funny. So, sort of humorous rock songs, and, they had kind of comedy bits in between the songs, which was great. And, but yeah, they said that was the largest crowd that they'd ever played, was the O2 Arena.
Really? When you said Tenacious D, I was thinking a rapper from the 90s. Why did I think
Right,
that?
yeah.
How do I get that wrong?
Jack Black.
It's Jack Black. Okay, so it's a comedy show. Comedy music.
Well, it's a music rock show, but it's, it's always been a humorous kind of band. So they make sure to put in lots of jokes between songs.
Oh, okay. Well, I go to the medical clinic 3 times a week to do physical workouts at their gym. Mm-hmm. And I went there the other day and I noticed no one was wearing a mask. They finally took away their mask mandate. That was the last place. The hospitals had already done it. But my clinic, and I realized, because when we started this podcast, it was a couple, 3 weeks before the pandemic was announced as a pandemic. And ever since, the whole podcast, and now this is the first time I've gone naked, I realize I have to take care of my face now. Because that's my my main public outing is that 3 days a week. So I have to look after the face now, make sure there's no tattoos or anything like that, or drool, or, all kinds of wonderful things that I used to keep under the mask. And, there's a lot of mosquitoes here because it's rained a lot, like thunderstorms. And
I wouldn't know because I've been stuck in a
well, it rained before you left too, so there's this, it's never good for mosquitoes, and they're terrible. So I've fired up this thermocell mosquito area thing, which uses a butane tank, and I noticed that there's a new version, and it's bigger. And the reason why it's bigger, I finally figured out, is because it's got a battery in it. So they replaced the butane in that, the fossil fuel, with lithium-ion batteries, and it lasts longer. And if you leave it on, you don't feel bad that you've burnt through a whole tank of butane. That you have to go to the store and get more.
That's great. I didn't realize something like that could be electrified. It's something about the heat that attracts the mosquitoes.
Right. It creates a little heat element, and there's this little pad on it that either displeases the mosquitoes or kills them. I don't know, but we've been using it for a decade, and it works really well. Like it'll clear the whole area we're sitting in the backyard, or the whole picnic we're at, or whatever. But now there's a battery version, so that's great, and I can charge it with my solar panels. Brian, there's been some Chevy Bolt news. If you're new to the podcast, I bought one 3 months ago, I guess now, for the family. My wife uses it for her job, and we use it around for our main vehicle. And our second vehicle is a low-range Nissan Leaf from early EV times. Anyway, they're hinting now that the Bolt is going to be discontinued very soon, and last production will be November 7th. And somebody has reported a rumor that the last orders taken would be in August. So basically, I'm glad I got my car, because it would have been, there's people been waiting a year to get theirs, a lot, even in the States. A few people in the States have been waiting a year. So I'm glad that I got a canceled order. And the consensus is that the price will go up on them once they're discontinued because people will still want them. And it'll probably be 2 or 3 years before we see competitively priced EVs around that you can buy. So, yeah. But there's something that really pissed the people off. You know how I'm in touch with all the Bolt owners in the United States through the forums on Facebook. Well, GM has been replacing their batteries because of this big battery recall, basically on all of them that were ever made. And so people who had like an old vehicle were saying, hey, I can get my battery replaced after 5 years of using it. I'm going to run it into the ground and I'll get a new battery because batteries slowly degrade over time and you have less range. And that's one of the big concerns is the battery health of vehicles. Although in the Bolt, it's excellent when it doesn't go on fire. And only 6 or 7 of them, maybe 8 are on fire. So that's not too many. But they said now that we're not going to replace them anymore. So the people have been sitting around watching Hertz get like 100,000 of these things or tens of thousands of them. And their neighbor's buying one like me and they can't get their battery replaced because it's, they're just taking too long. Now they're saying they're not going to replace those batteries. Most of them have been replaced, but now they've finally, after 2 years, came up with a diagnostic software that will tell you if your battery is faulty. And it's too bad they didn't do that a long time ago.
Right.
Because replacing a battery is very expensive. Especially for, I think it was LG who made the batteries and is responsible for replacing them. So that was interesting.
Yeah, and definitely costing LG or GM or both of them a couple of $1 billion to do that.
So somebody told me the other day that Toyota's getting like money from the government to invest in EVs. Like the Japanese government is giving them money to, hurry up their EV game. So that's pretty pathetic. And, this large company that's one of the world's biggest automakers is doing, shaky things. So there was a 30% rise in Toyota stock, and it added $31 billion in market value this week after the company shared details of how it plans to catch up in the global shift to electric vehicles. I'm still extremely skeptical. They said they can sell 1.5 million of them in a couple of years, maybe 2026. Yeah. That's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
No, and their announcement this week that caused their stock to rise, it was basically the exact same thing they said about 4 years ago, where they've got this solid state breakthrough and blah, blah, blah. And in 5 years, we're going to have electric vehicles.
Unfortunately.
They said the same thing 4 years ago.
For a lot of solid state, that's the case. There are, however, some examples of solid state batteries coming online now. Are they economical? Do they make economic sense? That's another question. That freeway collapse in Philadelphia that's shut down the I-95, one of the biggest routes in the United States?
Yeah, I saw a picture of that, yeah.
You know what that was caused by? Fossil fuels. It was a tanker truck. A tanker truck. We talk about pipelines. And by the way, I've got a pipeline story, a minor one. But because I live next to one. I live next to 7 of them. I hate bringing my son up all the time, but he worked with some people who worked with the pipeline company, Enbridge. And they said, move right away. So that's confidence inspiring. They said, if you ever see a fog in the area, run like hell. It's a natural gas leak because there's different kinds of pipelines. And, they also said that the reason why they dug it up in behind my house a few years ago was because there was a bacteria causing it to rust, a special oil bacteria that they discovered, and they had to check out if they were rusting through. So with this tanker truck exploding and the heat collapsing an overpass on a major freeway, that's going to take months of traffic backups, months at best, maybe a year, because of fossil fuels. And like my mosquito magnet thingy, let's get rid of fossil fuels, Brian. Brian, the big news this week, well, we were off. We ran a repeat episode last week. We were off because you were, prancing around the UK, having a good time, as you well deserve. And GM came along and announced that they, too, along with Ford, will also adopt the Tesla adapter. And that was such huge news that I think I almost became verklempt. Like, it's just a big, big deal in the march towards electrification of transportation. It opens up the network. It doubles the amount of chargers available, maybe more. I mean, physically, there's twice as many chargers, but the fact that they're all working, or most of them are all working, means it's even more than doubling the available chargers for you on the highway if you want to buy a car and you're worried about that. And just because the standard is more reliable, generally speaking, but people point out if you put a Tesla adapter on a Electrify America charger, they're still not going to work. The adapter's not going to fix anything. But still, it's a big deal, and it's who's next? I think that's the question. Like everybody says, Volkswagen will be the last to play.
Yeah, and I can tell you the news from this morning, if you heard it, but Rivian is now on board.
Oh,
Rivian
really?
is gonna go. Yeah, that just happened this morning. So yeah, Tesla, Ford.
You have more morning in your day than I have because you're in a later time zone.
I'm a couple hours later. So I've been up for hours, James, for days.
Just injected coffee into my veins for the podcast, so I haven't got to all the news from today. That is really good news.
Yeah.
Unexpected, but it's the only thing stopping them really is pride, I think.
Yeah.
And just it doesn't help that Elon Musk is a douchebag, getting a bigger douche rating every day. But hopefully that doesn't affect anything, and the Tesla North American Charging Standard, or NACS, will now dominate over the larger ones.
Yeah, and apparently it's cheaper to implement, too. That was the other thing that Tesla figured out when they figured out the standard, was to make it more cheaply. So the chargers and the ports and everything, like to put it in the car or to put it in a charger, is just cheaper. So anybody, if Volkswagen decides not to get on board, they're going to end up paying a couple $100 more per car because the CCS port is apparently just more expensive to put in.
So I don't think Tesla made them, a fraction of the size for style as much as they did price. They seem to be motivated by cost. So if the cost was cheaper to make it large and gangly and unruly, they probably would have went that route. But no, they found that this was the best way to go, and their engineering paid off because they have their own company. And everybody else is a consortium and sort of, has different people putting in their own 2 bits on the CCS standard. So it never worked out. So in this case, Beta is winning. Everybody's calling this, the Beta VHS war, where Beta won this time and Beta was better. Can you remind us why Beta was better than VHS, being a film prof retired?
I never understood why Beta was better. I think just it was maybe a simpler mechanism or something. But VHS had a longer record time, like you could do 6 hours. And I think that's why it won. But no, I never quite got that. But like, speaking of standards, like 2 weeks ago, we talked about CHAR-IN, which is the consortium that handles the CCS standard. And they were annoyed a couple of weeks ago that Ford was going with the Tesla charger because they were pushing CCS. That's their whole deal. Now they've come around, and it sounds like that they're going to start working to make the NACS more of a universal standard. So I don't know, the roadblocks are all falling, and other kind of charging companies, people who make chargers, have announced that they're going to support it. So yeah, I think all the dominoes are falling, and Tesla, the NACS, will be the North American standard, I think.
So what car companies are left? The Jeep, Chrysler people.
Stellantis said that they're thinking about it. So,
okay.
I'm assuming they will come on.
And then Volkswagen would be the big one. Of course, what do you think about the Korean companies? Do you think they'll come around?
I assume they're going to come on board too, especially if it's cheaper to implement. Why not? And with Volkswagen, obviously they make CCS for their cars in Europe, so they might be annoyed that they have to do one connector in North America and one in Europe. But
I heard that the CCS there is a little different, though.
It's slightly different anyway. It's not the exact same thing, so might as well go with Tesla.
Yeah. Well, I don't know who's going to be next, but certainly Kia and Hyundai are selling a lot of EVs and not as many as they should or we want them to be, but they selling them for a long time and have a good selection of models now. So hopefully they'll come on board, and Stellantis and maybe Volkswagen will be the last holdout, but they are also a big one with big EV plans. So hopefully they do something about this. Anyway, Rivian has bought a better route planner. A better route planner is the go-to software that I've used when planning a route, or theoretically thinking about a route. And I've also used it when thinking about buying a car, because I think about the different trips that I make and what would it be like? What would be the real world circumstances? How many times would I charge? How long would I have to spend charging? How long would it spend my trip? What's it really going to be like? And with a Chevy Bolt that only charges at 54 kilowatts, it's a bit of an issue for me. So I did lots of looking at that, especially in the wintertime. My God, it's slower in the wintertime.
That's the nice thing about the software, and it is great software. You can put in your type of car. So it knows, you put in, it's a 2022 Chevy Bolt. It knows what that can charge at. It knows what the range is. You can put in if there's any degradation in your battery. It understands that you can change weather conditions and your speed and everything.
And your weight.
So yeah, typically I use it when I'm planning a trip when I'm not in the car, because the route planning software in a Tesla is great. Like, you just do it in the car. But if I'm just sort of contemplating, well, I'd like to drive somewhere, I can just pull out the app and see, oh, is this going to work? I put in my model car and everything. So I think it's probably a smart move for Rivian. This is something they can integrate into the software for their cars to make the route planning better. And as we just said, they're going to start adopting the Tesla charging standard. So that opens up more chargers. So yeah, I think a smart move for Rivian.
Well, one thing that I learned is with Android Auto on my Chevy 23 Chevy Bolt, they will let you use a better road planner right on the screen in your car, right? However, when you do that, you have to have the premium version. You have to pay for it. It won't let you do that unless you pay for it. So you have to use it on your phone, which is a pain in my butt. Because how often am I going to travel? I might make one significant trip a year in that car. I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
There's a free version of a better route planner, but if you want all the features,
and there's basically a website too. If you're new to this, go to abetterrouteplanner.com or ABRP. You can Google that, a better route planner, and just try out different cars. And some, the newer the car, the less data they have, and they'll call it a beta version until they get more information and how that works. But yeah, it's great. And it's, you would use the Tesla one okay if it was on your app, on your phone. Do you think they'll ever do that?
Yeah, and I think they have maybe started to, I'll have to check. That was supposed to be coming to the app.
I think about a route planner also, like the Tesla app does terrain and wind and weather, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
There was one thing where you could type in the wind, but it was like in meters per second. It's like, what the hell's that? What?
Yeah. And I think with a better route planner, if you go with the paid version, it has real-time weather involved.
Okay. But I do notice, Brian, without doing that with the free version, that it is different now in the summer than it was in the winter for the same route. So it is factoring in what they call seasonal conditions. Yeah. As opposed to maybe real time. But I don't forget how much it costs, and I don't know. But if you do a lot of traveling, it's worth it. Not so much for me.
Yeah, and the Tesla planning has gotten better over the years in terms of estimating how much battery you're going to get. It gets better every year, which is nice.
Do you find that it's accurate when you take a trip?
Yeah, it's usually now within a few percent.
So it'll say you'll arrive at this charger with 13% of your battery, and you can feel confident in that?
Yeah, and the more you drive, the more accurate it gets. So you might leave on your trip and it'll say you'll arrive with 20%, and then it'll move either up or down. And after you've been driving for an hour or so, it gets very accurate. I
see. Okay. Well, what about the NASDAQ?
Yes, so other news from Rivian, lots of Rivian news this week. This is bad news for Rivian. They've been removed from the NASDAQ 100 index, which was an index of 100 top companies on NASDAQ, like tech kind of companies, because unfortunately their stock price has lost 90% of its value from its peak, which was a way overinflated peak. But, hopefully that makes it a good buy as a stock because hopefully they're still going to be around. But it's hard to say. I mean, any new car company is difficult to start. They're obviously still losing money on all of their cars, but hopefully they can turn this around.
Well, am I remembering correctly? They have a partnership with Ford and Amazon. I think they're helping Ford make some vehicles. So that's a lot of, Ford put a whole bunch of money into them. So they've got some big backers.
Yeah, Amazon is a big one. They're, of course, making vans for Amazon. I'm not sure how the Ford thing is going, but I think they're far enough along that somebody like Amazon probably would buy them if they ended up to be in trouble, but it's hard to say.
Yeah, FedEx in Toronto, I think, is getting 50 electric vehicles, and they're already starting to do that. I look forward to my packages coming on an electric vehicle and seeing them around town, but not where we live.
That's the GM Bright Drop van, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It's made in Canada, in Ontario somewhere.
Yeah.
So Brian, we had mentioned this before in brief, and I said that I would talk about it more. This is the Montana lawsuit, which is pretty significant because it's not a lawsuit, because a lot of lawsuits like this don't make it to trial. This one made it to trial. It is a historic case, more than 10 years in the making, and it has landed in the actual Montana courtroom, I think, a little over a week ago, and it should actually wrap up soon. I don't know when we'll get a decision, but what is happening here is a really big move to get the courts involved in the climate. Like, we've talked about this a lot. Well, this is a group of 16 young people. Now, some of them, I don't quite understand this, are as young as 5, but a lot of them are teenagers, or they were teenagers when they filed it. Now they're in college. Yeah. I think one is a junior and one is a sophomore. And they're these young people who have concern about their damn futures, as you would understand them to be. More than the old white men running the show, these people actually care about the planet. And in Montana, nature is everything. That's what they say is the main reason for living there. Even as young people, they know that. So the fossil fuel industry is supporting and contributing to climate change, and the Montana government is supporting the fossil fuel industry doing this. So they are fighting the government. And they found that the judges thought that it had enough merit to go to trial. So it is at trial, and now we get a chance to bring in experts. So that's what they're doing. The government's decisions, they say, support fossil fuels is hurting their lives and their futures. And they're saying it is actually changing fundamentally what it means to be a kid in Montana. And speaking as a kid in the prairies of Canada, well, I'm not a kid, but I have an inner child. It's freaking stupid. You know, the smoke business we're going on from here to New York City, and it's crazy. It's nuts. This has never happened before.
So proud to be from Saskatchewan, and now it's just embarrassing.
And now I hear terrible stories every day about the climate being bogus and, terrible political things and bigotry and all kinds of things. I'm just not happy to be. We're going to have to move.
Yeah.
We'll go to London or Wales.
Let's do it.
So, there was a lot of strong efforts by the state government in Montana to keep this from going to trial, but it's gone to trial. So, yeah, they're arguing that they're embraced, and they really have been embracing it. So much so that the Montana government just passed something that said you can't think about the climate or CO2 emissions when you are assessing a new industrial proposal. That's not part of the picture. You can't think about that. So that's one of the things that could get overturned if they're successful. Brian, if they are successful, this is a huge domino effect, because so many things are in the pipeline to go to trial in other places if this passes. Other states and other jurisdictions in the United States and North America and around the world. So this is the first in a series of similar challenges pending in various states as part of an effort to increase pressure on policymakers to take more urgent action on emissions, says the New York Times. Their lawyer, I listened to a podcast with her, is quite interesting. You know what? Her name is Julia Olson, and she is an environmental lawyer. And in 2006, she was in a small town, I think in Ohio or somewhere similar, and went into a church that had become a repertory theater. And she was pregnant, and she said it was hot. she sat and watched Al Gore's documentary, An Inconvenient Truth. And I would like to give some props to that documentary. I know it's been made fun of by all sides over the years, but it was a big deal. Just like Greta Thunberg was a big deal. Like it moved the needle a great deal, I think, actually. Mind you, most of the people who were moved by it are left of center. But still, those people were moved to action, and a lot has happened since that movie, because it did help really impress upon the future and what is involved and how things are going. So, yeah, she was pregnant with her second son, and she decided from that point, she cried throughout the whole film, and decided that, her kids deserved a future, so she was going to work on that. And soon after that, she discovered a legal theory, the public trust doctrine, the idea that the government actually has a responsibility to take care of the natural resources, things like the land, the environment, and ensure that those are protected for current and future generations. And I saw a video of this with my family the other night, and we all started laughing because the first line of the Constitution, the preamble, reads, "We, the people of Montana, grateful to God for the quiet beauty of our state, the grandeur of our mountains, the vastness of our rolling plains, and a desiring to improve the quality of life." Yeah, an equal opportunity to secure this for liberty and for future generations. And guess what they're not doing? They're not securing it for future generations. Now, some of this wording came from coal companies in the 70s sort of abusing the land and the water, and they decided when they rewrote the Constitution then to put it into their Constitution. And then in the Declaration of Rights, it says early on, all persons have a right to a clean and healthful environment. And this, because Montana has the environment in the Constitution, is going to kick them in the ass for their support of fossil fuels. Her argument is that the government not only created an environment for fossil fuel industries to thrive, they knew that doing so will contribute to climate change. So good luck to those heroic young people. Young people are the future, Brian. And if this passes, if this goes through, if they have any win at all, it's a big, big deal.
Yeah, that's great to hear. We wish them the best of luck. Okay, so moving on to my brother. I mentioned this 3 weeks ago. My brother has a large property and acreage in Ontario, and he bought an electric zero-turn mower to mow the grass. And I asked him to write a little review so we get a little insight into what that's like. And it's better to electrify everything. So here's the letter from my brother. As Brian mentioned, I got an electric zero-turn mower. For your listeners who don't know, a zero-turn mower is a riding mower on steroids. It has a lap bar steering instead of a steering wheel, and the front wheels turn 360 degrees, so it turns on a dime. I purchased the Ego Power Plus 52-inch zero-turn, which is available at Lowe's and Rona in Canada. It was on sale for $9,500.
That's a lot for a mower.
It's a lot for a mower. The similar gas machine is about $5,900. This is Canadian dollars. So, yeah, as is typical, it does cost more, but I would think over time, the savings from gas and maintenance and everything, it would equal out or eventually be cheaper. So it comes with 6 56-volt, 12-amp-hour ARC lithium batteries. The manual says it takes about 4 hours to charge, which is faster than the others that I looked at. I currently have a 48-inch gas zero-turn. Operation-wise, they're pretty much the same, and they do a similar job. The Ego is more compact than the gas one. It's lower to the ground, presumably because it doesn't have the gas engine. The Ego also doesn't have a roll bar like the gas one, presumably because the lower center of gravity means it is less prone to tipping. It's very nice not having the roll bar because no matter how careful I was, I would always end up catching a branch and ripping it off. So I
thought he was going to hit his head. Okay.
Yeah. I did not know that mowers had roll bars.
Neither did I.
That's necessary, but with most electric vehicles, the battery's in the bottom of the car and it helps with rollover. So the manual says it can cut up to 4 acres on a single charge. I don't know how many acres my yard is, but it cut everything except the strip beside the driveway before running out of power. It ran for about an hour and 45 minutes. It was probably another 15 minutes to do the last strip, so 2 hours to do what the gas machine takes 2.5 hours to do. So it's actually faster.
How is that so? How? It's running faster. Everything's.
He didn't explain, but it's faster.
Okay. Well, it spins faster, runs faster.
Yeah. So when it gets low on power, it shuts down the blades and goes into limp home mode. There's enough power to go about 1 kilometer to get you back to the charging station.
That's a long way. I'm kind of surprised by that.
Yeah. So as long as your charging station is less than 1 kilometer, you don't really even have to worry about the battery level because, it'll just shut that off and you drive back when you're ready. Okay. When you turn it on, it's so quiet. The only way you know it's on is because the dashboard lights up. Once you turn on the blades, it's noisy enough that I would recommend ear protection, but it's nowhere near as noisy as the gas machine.
Nice.
And the garage doesn't fill up with black fumes.
Brian, I'm going to interrupt you there. I live adjacent to the pipeline, and beyond the pipeline is a small park and a soccer field and a school. And on the other side of my house is a boulevard. So in the middle of the boulevard is a, 2-meter strip of grass and trees.
Yeah.
And every day somebody's mowing something. Like every day the city is mowing one of those things. The soccer field gets mowed on a regular basis because it has to be short, even though no one uses it. But there's always someone mowing, so this would benefit me. And I hope I live long enough to see electric mowers, because I tell you, the ones on the boulevard, really noisy. Like, it scared the life out of me.
Yeah, and of course the other issue is we shouldn't all have these lawns, especially in Canada.
Yeah,
we
that's
don't
for
really
sure.
have the climate for it, and it just takes so much energy and resources to keep these lawns going that we should have wildflowers and wild grasses instead.
I'm
of
having
lawns.
trouble with my front lawn. I tried to put a spike sprinkler in it, and it was so hard I couldn't get the sprinkler. It's bad. I don't know what to do. Zeroscape, I guess, but it never seems to work out for people.
Okay, so finish off the letter here. It's very nice just to be able to push a button and have it turn on. Even though we would get the gas zero tuned up every year, it never started cleanly, especially if you stopped and then tried to restart it again while the engine was still warm. It would have a really hard time restarting. It's nice not to have it tuned up, since it's a pain to get the big machine to the shop. And the best thing is I can charge my phone while mowing the lawn.
Wow. I took my electric lawnmower in my electric Leaf and went over to my aunt's house, who is in the hospital and going into a home. And, her yard got a notice that it had to be cleaned up or she'd be fined, and city workers would come and do it. And they're making her do her backyard too, we found. So I don't know who sees the backyard, but I need a riding mower for that. And there's a bunch of branches. I don't know. We can't do it. We want to hire somebody. Yeah. And apparently that everybody's so busy because it's been raining so much that there's so much to mow that it's hard to get in there. So that's interesting. And who's, like, I saw an ad for a riding mower. I don't think it was, what is it? What did he buy?
Ego was the brand.
Ego. That's a good brand for lawnmowers and snowblowers. I know that. And they're usually much more expensive too, but probably worth it if you can afford it.
Yeah, and I just wanted to cap this with to talk about John Deere a little bit, because John Deere just recently announced their very first zero-turn riding mower. It's just out. We had a letter a couple of weeks ago from somebody who works for John Deere in Saskatchewan, and he was mentioning that John Deere is working on a lot of electrification and a lot of autonomous stuff. So, I just wanted to add to this. So, my brother got an Ego, but the John Deere version is out. And I found a note here from ARK Invest about John Deere. So ARK Invest is the Wall Street investment firm that's very much into innovation and disruptive technologies. ARK Invest have been big supporters of Tesla and made a lot of money off Tesla stock, and predicting still very, very high prices for Tesla in the future because they're such a disruptive company. Well, they're also interested, ARK Invest, in John Deere. So they've got a note here on their website. According to our research, when the autonomous technology is combined with its Exact Shot Planter 3 and See and Spray Ultimate Sprayer, the operating costs of corn and soybean production are likely to decline by more than 25%. So
holy crap.
A combination of electrification and autonomy and intelligent planting on all of these things is going to lower the costs. So the 8R, there's an 8R. It currently focuses on tillage. Advances in the technology will automate both the sprayer and the combine. Second, by applying fertilizer directly at the seed level, Exact Shot reduces the required amount of starter fertilizer by more than 60%.
And that, Brian, in turn reduces greenhouse gases because fertilizer makes greenhouse gases when you manufacture it.
But, imagine saving 60% on your fertilizer. So they think that, that the John Deere technology could reduce corn and soybean farm operating costs by 26% to 31% on a per acre basis, and 20 to 50% take rate based on the savings alone. John Deere should be able to generate a recurring revenue stream with software as a service like margins as its an autonomous technology proliferates. So it sounds like John Deere kind of wants to be the Tesla of farming machinery. Like, the smarter that you can make all this stuff and the more autonomous, the better it is.
Mind-blowing stuff. That's, farming is a business. And there's a lot of people around here. I know because my kids keep telling me the BS they hear online. And I'm not exposed to it, but they like to expose themselves to it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, bro culture around here and agricultural beliefs that electrification is a joke.
Yeah.
But if you're a farmer and you're a business, you're a small business, and you don't do these things to save money, you're not going to compete. You're not going to stay in business. And hell, you're going to be throwing money away. So a lot of what we talk about on the show is the economics of this new technology and clean energy. And that is what is going to be unstoppable. I don't care, how stupid you are to support fossil fuels if you're the Montana government. It's an unstoppable force, and it's economics, because people eventually. It's surprising to see some utilities, like Texas is poo-pooing renewables, even though it's a big business. But, the lobbyists are in the fossil fuel industry more so than the clean energy. Maybe clean energy needs to throw on some cowboy hats and get some lobbyists in Dallas and Houston, because it's just kind of gross.
And I think the letter from my brother is the perfect example of this. This isn't going to happen overnight. And we've talked about things like combines are going to be trickier to electrify, but just the example of the zero-turn mower to mow a few acres, clearly from my brother's letter, infinitely better to do it electric, and it's just going to keep moving up the chain. That's a small machine, and each machine getting bigger will eventually be electrified, and it'll be better.
And it'll be better and easier and more time for the farmer to do other things, as I speculated last week. Oh, it's time for the tweet of the week. This is from Ook Hustra, director of Neon Research in the Netherlands. The solar energy hurricane is still gaining strength. So he wrote about research on the declining cost of solar. Now, as you know, since solar was a thing in the 70s and to now has gone down, if you look at the chart, it's ridiculous. You would need a forklift or a riser like Al Gore did in his film. You would have to go way up to find the beginning price per kilowatt of solar and compared to what it is now. So the learning in solar production, also called Swanson's Law, is not slowing down, but it's actually speeding up, because this is interesting. We've speculated about this before. There's been lots of talk about, well, it can't go any lower. How low you can't keep saving money till it costs, 1/10 of a penny instead of 6 pennies, at some point it's got to just slow down. Well, apparently it's speeding up. We often say every doubling of production lowers solar module prices by 20%. But from 76 to 22, it was actually 24.4%. And from 2006 to 2022, it was 39.3% in that time since the lawyer watched it. And inconvenient truth, solar has gone down 40% a year. So solar is becoming incredibly cost effective. This is partially due to cheaper production per piece. if you think of a solar panel and all the pieces that go into it, the wafers, 15% of that is partially due to the price per piece and partly due to the efficiency of each piece getting higher. We talk about this on the show. There's incremental little improvements in the efficiency of solar panels due to new technology. A big one is bifacial solar panels with multi-layers and taking up both sides. So as prices of modules become lower, he says, other project costs start to dominate. Yeah, because, some of the prices become very expensive, like the land, the leasing of the land, the structures to hold the modules. So as these prices of the modules become so dirt cheap, then you start to think about, everything else is the thing. And how is steel going to come down in price, or aluminum, or whatever you're using to mount them? But as prices of modules become lower, other project costs start to dominate, and efficiency per meter square becomes more important. And he says, therefore, it's good to be excited about the tandem or multi-layer solar panels that are promising efficiencies of more than 26%. And I also like that bus bars, he says, are those silver lines on solar panels are going away. He says it's good for aesthetics, and it's also good for that square meter production of power. Solar modules use less and less silicon because wafers continue to become thinner, from 0.16 millimeters in 2022 to 0.13 projected for 2033. And at the same time, the wafer size is increasing from 165 by 165 to 210 by 210. So N-type material is taking over the market, which might help achieve higher efficiencies and lifetimes. Because the longer it lasts, the lower per kilowatt hour the thing is, because you figure out how much it's going to produce over its lifetime. So the N in N-type stands for negative because there is an excess of negative charge carriers, electrons, if you will, by means of doping the silicon with phosphorus. So they're also going to last longer. And so right now, the degradation is set to be less per year in the first year, 1% in 2033, which is half of what it is now. And the warranties are expected to expand to 15 years. And the performance warranty is expected to go from 25 years now to 35 years. So if you're adding 10 years of solar production, even if it's a little bit less than it was when you installed it, it's still lowering the cost of solar because you're figuring out how many cents per kilowatt hour will it cost over the lifetime of this plant, just like when you do nuclear or anything else. And it is becoming cheap and actually accelerating because solar is on fire right now. And everyone says, everything else, fusion, fission, water, it's solar, Brian. We know that. You know that. I know that.
Dirt cheap.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go on.
Okay, so moving on to an electric cruise ship. This story is from Electrek, and it's the kind of story I hesitate to talk about because it's quite far in the future, and I don't know how realistic this plan is, but we've talked about the carbon footprint of me flying to London, which is something, it not only is flying an unpleasant experience, there's a bad carbon footprint. I looked into the alternatives, and like taking a cruise ship across the Atlantic takes a week on a big diesel-powered city, basically, and so
it's worse.
The carbon footprint of that is worse. By the way, the best thing that I found is you can actually ride on a cargo ship across the Atlantic.
So it's going anyway.
Yeah, it's going anyway. So if you Google that, there's a few companies, passage on a cargo ship. There's a few companies that will facilitate that for you. And they don't take very many people, 20 people, 30 people, something like that. And you kind of live with the crew.
Is there entertainment? Does the crew do a magic show?
Oh, yeah, that's right. There's a magic. Yeah, there's a ventriloquist and a magician. But yeah, so it's, you eat with the crew, you kind of live with the crew. You're kind of like a crew member, but they've got space for, 20 or 30 people. So that's the lowest carbon footprint if you want to cross the Atlantic, but you got to do it on a cargo ship. I don't know. I'm not too interested in that.
I want to see a video, one of these travel videos on YouTube of somebody doing that. I wonder if they exist. They must.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure that's a thing. Like, I'm sure somebody has done that just to make YouTube videos for it.
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you?
But anyway, so Norwegian Cruise Line Company Hurtigruten revealed plans for a first-of-a-kind zero-emission cruise ship. The electric-powered cruise ship will feature retractable sails with solar panels to harness energy from the wind and the sun while storing it in powerful batteries. So there's three, imagine the Titanic with the 3 or 4 smokestacks on it. These have 3 kind of sails on it that have solar panels on them.
Right.
And I imagine they can be spun and oriented in different ways to harness both the wind and the sun. So this first electric cruise ship is not due until 2030. It'll have 60 megawatt hours of battery packs and include several industry firsts to harness wind and solar while at sea for a truly zero emission experience. So for example, the company plans to include these 3 retractable sails with solar panels on them. And the wing rigs are designed to enhance the aerodynamics and pull in air currents at up to 50 meters for added propulsion. So there's also going to be lots of sensors and cameras and AI to do the steering and maneuvering, so they can reduce the size of the bridge. And it's, you've seen that in movies, like the bridge on a ship is massive. So they can move down to a smaller bridge. So basically efficiency is a huge part of this. Old cruise ships are not designed in any efficient way. It's like, yeah, make it as heavy as you want. It doesn't really matter. We'll just put in a bigger diesel engine in it. But if we're going to switch over to electric, everything's just got to be lighter and more efficient. To including like the lights on the ship are just going to have to be super energy efficient, and I would imagine motion sensors so that the lights are only on when they need to be on. So yeah, it's basically the same thing that's happening when people are designing electric cars from scratch. Is you just have to think differently about it, make everything more efficient, more aerodynamic, and lighter. So yeah, who knows? I mean, it's supposed to hold 500 people. It doesn't say anything about the range, so I'd be surprised if this could go, across the Atlantic. And it's not until 2030 that this first one is coming. But hey, it's a start.
I saw the other day, I have a camper, a pop-up tent trailer, and all campers really have awnings. If you don't, you're because you have to live outside and you don't want to be in the beating down sun. Well, they turned the awning into a solar panel. A soft solar awning. So I thought that was brilliant. Yeah. And I want one of those.
That makes a lot of sense. And just quickly too, there's another story here about a company called Ebusco, which is in the Netherlands. And they've started to make some large electric buses, like passenger buses with up to 575 kilometer range. So it's the same kind of thing. I watched a little video from this company, and it's called, Ebusco. And they've just started delivering these. So they have basically just started production of these. And, they're not going to make thousands, but they're going to make hundreds anyway. And they've got a little video here about making them, and it's that same kind of thing. It's about the efficiency, right? So a lot of the bus is carbon fiber rather than steel to keep the weight down. So, it's the reimagining of the passenger bus to make it lighter so that it can be electric and get a decent range.
Well, we're going long this week. It just goes to show if you take a week off, you can't.
The news piles up.
That's why we rarely do. There's just so much news in clean energy that it's just, we have to hire our staff. I've got a bonus tweet of the week, sponsored by Air Canada. I'm kidding. Just trying to jab you with that knife, Brian. Remind you that Air Canada exists. This is from Mark Z. Jacobson. And simple math, he says 800,000 Montana drivers is 15,000 miles per year, okay? There's 800,000 drivers in Montana. The average is 15,000 miles per year. Gasoline is $3.86 a gallon. Electricity is only 12.1 cents there. The fuel cost over a 15-year Ford F-150 four-wheel drive gasoline 8-cylinder is 18 miles per gallon. So that's $48,000 over 15 years.
Of fuel.
EV at 480 watt hours per mile is only $13,000 per
year.
Well, in that time,
Yeah.
in the 15 years. So 15-year savings for one driver is $35,000. If you did that for all drivers in Montana, it would be $28.1 billion.
Wow.
So he says, even if an EV costs $10,000 more, your savings are still $20 billion. So, wow. And he says here's another one from him that I like. And he says, what is the number one concern about going to 100% wind, water, and solar, or WWS? So how to provide reliable electricity under that scenarios. He says there are 6 ways. And I'd like to remind everyone, because even people listen to our show sometimes forget. Storage, okay? There's different kinds of storage. There's battery storage, which is chemical storage. That is taking off, obviously. Tesla is doing it. Other companies are doing it. Water storage is one way of doing it, like pumping water upstream onto a high elevation, or pumping it up backwards on a dam, or just turning off the dam when you have lots of wind and solar. Demand response. So improving demand response is a big deal. Oversized generation, which is something we talk about, because solar panels and things like in wind is getting so cheap, you overbuild it. That's how you do it. You overbuild it. Most of the days you're actually wasting it or giving it away, and it's just those few days in winter when it's cloudy and not windy that you need to overbuild it for that. Importing electricity from a long ways away, that's something Singapore is doing all the way from Australia, and Europe is doing from the Sahara Desert. So you can do that, especially over water. Interconnect wind, water, and storage over large areas. Yes, large areas. It's not always going to be the same weather in the same area. That is the big challenge, Brian, is building those transmission lines over large areas. This is something we have to do now because it makes it easier. Instead of just having a whole bunch of batteries, it's easier just to share our electricity over a large area. And so electrify transport and industry and buildings. Doing that also helps because you have storage in those things as well. Now, I saw a tweet, and actually in Alberta, they had, remember a year ago we were talking about our province having the possibility, I think Power Magazine said that we were one of the jurisdictions that might have shortages.
Yeah.
Well, they did in Alberta. They tweeted out and got people to use less electricity in our neighboring province. And they have all these wildfires burning over there. So that's just something I wanted to highlight as another tweet.
All right. Let's move on to the mailbag.
We do have some mail here. This actually came from Instagram DM from Jeff. That's the first time we've got an Instagram DM. Sometimes I forget we're even on Instagram. We are. Hello, Instagram. Toyota, we have some people out there who actually work for Toyota. So yeah, he wanted to point out that Toyota is supporting Kentucky's largest solar project. The largest solar project in Kentucky is actually coming from Toyota's Georgetown, Kentucky plant, its biggest manufacturing site in the world. It's about 150 miles from the proposed solar array, which is planned on a former coal mine elsewhere in Kentucky. And while the power generated in eastern Kentucky won't be physically delivered to Toyota, the automaker has agreed to purchase the plant's output in what's known as a virtual power purchase agreement. These are quite common, and Toyota will count the clean power as an offset of electricity it uses in its operations to consume fossil fuels.
Yes, many businesses want clean energy.
Time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
Battery storage investment globally doubled in 2022 and will jump 80% in 2023. I predict it'll be more. It's always more, Brian. It's always more than what they predict. They're scared. They're scared to predict what will actually happen. Investment more than doubles this year in the United States, it is predicted. It is time for a CS Fast Fact. Running of all the UK's cars on synthetic e-fuels, which some people are pushing for, would take 5 times as much electricity as EVs. For 33 million cars burning e-fuels would need more electricity than the UK currently uses for all purposes. So if you converted the UK's cars to e-fuels, it would take more electricity to make those e-fuels than what the UK uses for everything. So not a good idea. Oh, it's time for some sad news. I don't like to do this, but every once in a while, we have something bad. Boeing predicts airlines around the world will add 42,000 plus jets valued at $8 trillion over the next 2 decades, even as concerns over climate change affect the way consumers travel, like Brian Stockton thinking of going on a cargo ship with his little sailor hat and, his rat gun. Boeing expects the global fleet will nearly double through 2042. We shall see. Britain, Brian, wasted enough wind generation last year to power 1 million homes because investments in and planning approvals for electricity grid upgrades are not keeping up with the rapid growth of wind power development. Yeah, that's kind of the challenge of where we're at. Wind's taking off so fast in the UK that the grid is not keeping up, so they're actually wasting some of that power. The report was published last week by the financial think tank Carbon Tracker. Another CS Fast Fact for you. The UK total wind pipeline was second globally at 98 gigawatts. China, with 157, followed by the USA in third. Sweden is fourth, and Brazil, to my surprise, because we don't talk about Brazil. I want to talk more about Brazil. Kind of got a stupid government there, but they do have some wind power at 63 gigawatts, which is nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, and good for Sweden, not a particularly populated country, but to be fourth in wind power, that's great.
That is good. So a lot of their electricity must be coming from wind. One of the most severe marine heat waves. This is something I've never uttered before. Marine heat waves on Earth has developed off the coast of Ireland and the UK, possibly due to Brian's trip. The water temperatures are as high as 4 to 5 degrees Celsius. 4 to 5 degrees Celsius above normal, which is really significant when you're talking about water.
Not good.
They could get a storm. If a storm went up that way, it would be bad. Ooh, another CES Fast Fact from the Fast Fact Ferry. In Europe's waters, 218 cruise ships emitted last year as much poisonous sulfur oxides as 1 billion cars.
Yikes.
This is in Europe's waters. The cruise ships in Europe's waters emitted as much poisonous sulfur oxides as 1 billion cars. This is, you're driving close to land when you're in a cruise ship.
Yeah, most of it's out of the ocean. I'm sure it's fine.
Oh, I'm sure it's fine, Brian. We'll see. Just bring a mask when you go on your ship. Hydrogen car sales are so low that we are unable to make long-term forecasts, says Bloomberg NEF. In 2022, only 15,000 hydrogen cars were sold compared to 10.5 million battery electric vehicles. But no, hydrogen cars are the future. Toyota, who's still developing them. 85% of new residential solar deals in California now include batteries. That's a shock. So if you're getting solar in California already, because they screwed up the solar plan there, we had a letter from one of our listeners there, that's up from 20%. 20% before these new net metering policies took effect. So, in California, batteries make a lot of sense because electricity is expensive. And it will in other parts of the world as batteries become lower and electricity gets more expensive. New International Energy Agency report on oil demand, peak oil combustion by 2028. The latest IEA global market outlook, petrol demand to peak this year for road transportation, oil demand peaking 2025, all transport by 2026, overall oil for combustion peaking in 2028. Good news, but can't come fast enough. PV Magazine, an international research team, has designed a floating PV system that can reportedly withstand wave heights above 10 meters. In other words, it can go on the stinking ocean, which is incredible. On the ocean, floating. I don't know how the fish will feel about that, but it's interesting. Running all of the UK's cars on okay, I got that one already. Heat pump theft. This is funny. This is Sweden. Heat pump theft is on the rise in Sweden. You might have to worry about this if you ever come back to your heat pump. And it's a question right now whether you ever will make it back to your home. But the Gothenburg District Court in Sweden has charged 8 people for allegedly stealing nearly $460,000 of heat pumps. Wow. Hang on to your heat pumps, people. And finally this week from Bloomberg, a total of 19 trains carrying coal to Australia's flagship coal port on the export hub were disrupted after a protester suspended themselves from 2 poles over the rail tracks. Part of a railway line in Coorang, close to the port of Newcastle in South Wales State, was halted for more than 4 hours from 7 a.m. Last Monday. So one person is so pissed off at coal that they're standing up to it. Brian, this is the longest show in our history. Longest. I blame taking a week off. We can't afford it. Can't do it. That's our show. Believe it or not, we're done. I hope you stayed with us. Please take the time to contact us at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And there's a whole host of other ways you can contact us, including on Instagram. So check out our show notes for all the ways to contact us. If you are new to the show, remember to subscribe on your podcast app because you get new episodes every week. All this clean energy news coming right at you every week. And we ask that you leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast app, just like Disney Matter did on Apple Podcasts this week. And they said, been listening for over 2 years and I'm never disappointed. Thank you, because even I disappoint myself on a daily basis. You can also watch them on YouTube. This podcast is filled with banter about clean energy news with the occasional rant. I think he's talking about me.
Yeah.
My ears are burning. Thoroughly enjoy the show each week and always looking forward to the next one. And that is from Apple Podcasts, supposedly in the United States. So thank you for that. And people, we appreciate you listening. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.